Donald Trump's Gaza-Israel peace plan. He's urging those involved to move quickly. He really wants this to land and to hold, doesn't it? But my God, it's got a lot flying around it.
Yeah, look, you could start from the position. It's remarkable that it's got to here, given that, you know, the Palestinians kind of were not really represented in the talks, and certainly no one from Hamas had any say in the drawing up of the document. And so, you know, rather than just dwelling on, and it's worth dwelling on, the problems, it's amazing the force of nature and the wish to please Donald Trump that it's come as far as it has. And if it is going to lead in the next 2 or 3 days to the release of all the hostages, then that is going to be a cause of massive celebration in Israel. It will lead to the release of a lot of Palestinian prisoners, which I'm sure will be welcome in the Gaza Strip. What happens to Hamas? I mean, there's only one direction of travel, which is that they're, you know, unless they give up and surrender their weapons, it's going to be very bloody.
Which he keeps saying, doesn't he, Donald Trump?
Which he keeps saying. I mean, you know, I would, with an arched eyebrow, I would say I don't think the Israelis have gone in with kid gloves so far. You know, it hasn't been there hasn't been a lack of force and an unwillingness to show muscle. So one can only imagine how much worse it could get. I mean, it's pretty bad as it is. So I don't think that is going to necessarily intimidate Hamas.
More of the same as far as they're concerned.
More of the same. But I think the interesting thing is that this deal got stitched together in the way that it did with enough Arab nations who've got clout to make the difference.
Turkey and Egypt in particular?
Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, which is where, of course, they've, Hamas found a political home and were allowed to operate from there as a sort of... And so I think that what Trump has done cleverly with Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, with Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, with Tony Blair, our former Prime Minister, is to get all these countries to sign up to this blueprint. Now, there's going to be a little bit of negotiation, but at the same time, I don't know how much wiggle room Hamas has got. Of course, it's quibbling over certain bits because it's, the document essentially...
Particularly the life beyond Hamas bit.
Exactly.
Yes.
And, and it's hard to see if... But, there'll be a lot of people in Gaza as well who absolutely hate the Israelis, but will be thinking, what hell have Hamas visited upon us as a result of their actions on October the 7th, 2 years ago.
And a word on the Palestinian Authority in all of this, and the party Fatah. They're part of the great hope beyond Hamas, aren't they? I was hearing one... how should I best describe him? I think rational, reasonable Palestinian commentator who said that the PA should absolutely embrace this and that they should be more honest with the Palestinian people about how close they are to some of their Israeli counterparts behind the closed doors and bring that relationship in front of the world. Now, whether they dare do that, given the feeling on the so-called Palestinian street, is another question. But that would be something to witness, wouldn't it? That behind closed doors there is more sort of camaraderie than you might expect between elements of the PA and elements of the Israeli government.
Yeah, and the other thing that's worth emphasising is the hostility that exists between Hamas, which is an Islamist fundamentalist group that wants to sweep Israel into the sea and believes the Jews have no place there, and Hamas and the PA, the Palestinian Authority, which is a sort of left-wing kind of secular organisation. It's had its own problems.
Not without its issues.
Not without its issues.
But it's not
corruption,
Hamas. Yeah.
It's old, but it's not Hamas. And, of course, the PA used to run Gaza and got booted out by Hamas. So for the Palestinian Authority, this peace deal would see them becoming the voice of the Palestinian people, whether in the West Bank or whether in Gaza Strip. And so the PA have got a lot to gain from it. The terrible deal with the devil that was done was that it suited Netanyahu's purposes to have Hamas so prominent because that would justify him not making any moves on a two-state solution. And it suited Hamas to have someone like Netanyahu as the Israeli Prime Minister. And then Hamas go way too far on October the 7th. And it is scorched earth policy from there on.
And the idea that Hamas is a political force in Gaza, I mean, clearly that is not part of this plan. Can you see anything other than individual self-preservation on the part of the surviving Hamas members to motivate them in this? Yes, get some prisoners free, of course, but to not be killed, basically, not to be targeted and killed. That's all they've got left, isn't it? Because they've lost this war, haven't they?
They have lost this war. And, what is left of Gaza, and as I say, the IDF, the Israeli Defence Forces have hardly gone in with kid gloves. They've been absolutely brutal in prosecuting this war against Hamas. And, a lot of collateral damage, a lot of civilians have been killed, a lot of children, women who had nothing to do with Hamas have died as a result of the Israeli action. Hamas have got nowhere to go. They will be wiped out.
Other than Qatar.
And also the fact of the matter is, when you've got these other Arab nations who've signed up to it, who hold a lot of power, who have got the remaining levers, I don't think there is much left for Hamas but to sort of, as elegantly as they can, withdraw or dress it up however they want to, but they've got to show a white flag, you'd have thought. And
just to bring it back to Donald Trump, I mean, I was listening to a podcast over the weekend. It was a new podcast to me that was suggesting that it was two Israeli journalists who are not fans of Netanyahu, not fans of Trump, but they were saying maybe it took, their words, a maniac like Donald Trump to actually pull this together.
Yeah, I think there is a reasonable argument to be made there. And I think that, we have seen what conventional politics did. And you had, Joe Biden in the White House trying to be as friendly as he could to Netanyahu, but had no leverage over him because Netanyahu thought he was a weak US president. You get Donald Trump coming along, who suddenly starts shouting the odds, who lets off the odd F-bomb, as he did at Netanyahu over the continuing bombing in Iran when there was that flare-up of regional tensions.
That's right.
And you get somebody like that who is prepared to, put out videos which show the Gaza Riviera and saying, if you don't go along with this is what you might get. And people suddenly thinking, well, actually, this peace plan may be as good as it gets. Everyone should sign up to it. And so, and because of the economic muscle that the US has, and because they'll be rebuilding contracts for all sorts of people to rebuild Gaza, there are still huge numbers of questions about who funds all of this and what the political kind of project looks like, 5 years down the road. I mean, huge unanswered questions. But his force of nature, his force of personality, if it pulls it off, that there is the return of the hostages, that there is peace in Gaza, that there is a rebuilding programme, a lot of ifs there. But who could begrudge him a Nobel Peace Prize if that happens? I was going
to say, I'll hand deliver it to him if that happens.
Exactly. I'll pay for the extra postage.
Okay. We might get a little flight on Air Force One again, John. You never know. No, but it's true, isn't it? In all seriousness, if that is what is achieved, even just the beginnings of it, the freedom of the hostages, the release of prisoners from the Palestinian perspective, the end of Hamas in Gaza, then you can start doing business, can't you?
Yeah, and look, I was living in Washington when we got news in the Bureau that there's going to be an announcement on Middle East peace. And I thought, oh, whatever, this is going to be nonsense. And it was the Abraham Accords. And suddenly
2020, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, and suddenly there is the normalization of relations between Israel and the UAE, and they're going to start, open embassies in each other's capitals, Bahrainis as well, Morocco too. And you suddenly think, wow, Donald Trump has pulled this off. And we had all joked about, Jared Kushner, who was the son of a property billionaire, being the guy who was going to deliver something to the Middle East. He did it.
Money talks.
And so, things have made progress. And maybe that total, ill-disciplined, unconventional, kind of almost nihilistic approach to it has actually worked and brought us closer than we have been in these ghastly 2 years.
And if we get beyond this next, say, week and see the freedom of the hostages, and there'll be releases for Palestinian prisoners as well, if we get past that, it's going to be so interesting, isn't it, to see the degree to which the economics of this, in a sense, could take over the politics. Clearly there's going to be politics in it, but the politics have been so poisonous for so long, particularly when you throw in Islamist violence into the mix. the idea that some pragmatism and some choices about people having economic futures in Gaza again would, and in the West, I mean, the West Bank we haven't even touched on, and we should have, because that's a whole different problem, isn't it, altogether?
Yes. So this was always, I mean, October the 7th happened because Hamas thought they were about to be utterly marginalised by the desire of these Middle Eastern countries to promote pragmatic solutions in the region that would involve recognition of Israel and Palestinian rights would be trampled on. So they thought if they did something absolutely extreme, it would lead to the destruction of Israel. It hasn't. It has failed in those terms. And I think people are going back to thinking, right, how can we get
a life here
and the life of ordinary Palestinians better than they were? Now, Israel is going to have to make some tough decisions and also have to make some tough concessions. Will it keep its forces out of the Gaza Strip? That remains to be seen. What is it going to do about settlement building in the West Bank, which, again, is very destabilising for the other Arab countries? Because if you've built up the West Bank, then where is the two-state solution? Where does the Palestinian state go if it's covered in Israeli settlements?
And a word on Netanyahu's future beyond this deal. If this deal is successful, it marks the end of him, the beginning of the end of him. I know that we've said that before.
20 years we've been counting, is this it for Netanyahu? And he bounces back. I would hate to count him out, but I think that any concessions he makes will lead to the breakup of his coalition. And, you know, we were just talking 20 seconds ago about what happens in the West Bank. You know, his Ben Gvir and Smotrich, these two ultra-right-wing ministers that are part of the government, they want to concrete over the West Bank and fly the Israeli flag over it. And, you know, there are next to no Palestinians left there. You know, I do not believe that the Gulf states, Egypt, Turkey are signed up for that.
No.
There is problems ahead, but there is progress that's been made as well.